you really know what the company is made of, or what the ethics and compliance or the code of conduct or that culture is made of when you are faced with that, like a star performer doing something non-compliant. What does the company do afterwards? That's the very critical moment. And I've seen companies that, do the right thing, meaning, okay, we have to part ways with a star performer.
That's Stan Lui, and this is the All Things Risk podcast. Welcome back to the All Things Risk podcast. I'm Ben Catania, your host. This is my show where we use the lenses of risk and uncertainty to understand ourselves and our world a little bit better. Let's get into today's episode. This is one all about how to take something that is important, but frankly, often considered less than exciting, and making that thing interesting and engaging. And anything that involves following rules is very much like this. And if you do compliance or legal work, you will have come across this. And even if you don't, chances are you have faced this dilemma at some point. And when faced with this dilemma, it's crucial to get creative or risk the consequences. I want you to meet my guest, Stan Lui. In his day job, Stan is the legal director for an automotive firm, and he is based in Hong Kong. And that means he works with colleagues on legal topics that are considered boring, but also are hugely important when you think about the risks of things like fraud or corruption. So Stan reached into his many creative talents, like street theater, which he practices, and founded something called the White Hat Guys, which aims to create an innovative and engaging compliance narrative. And that includes material like videos, interesting training, and other techniques for what Stan calls maximum message stickiness. And we get into all of that, how and why Stan set up White Hat Guys, cultural differences on some of these topics, and why sometimes those so-called cultural differences are a cop-out, and a range of topics in between. So let's dive in. Here is Stan Lui. Stan, welcome to the All Things Risk podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
So just to key things up, I wanted to give my listeners, in your own words, a little bit of your background and who you are and how you introduce yourself. I always find that that's a challenging question for me. I always go for the people who struggle to answer that question very succinctly, because the most interesting people in the world are people that have lots of varied backgrounds. So I'll give you, however you respond to that question. When you're asked what is it that you do and who you are, how do you respond?
So at the moment, I work for a automotive manufacturer based out of UK, but obviously with operation also headquartered in Detroit, because it's an auto player. I've been with that company for about 3 years. So I worked in the legal and compliance department. So legal and compliance has always been kind of my key area of focus. So before I joined the current employer, I was also working in the manufacturing industry, where that company manufactures power tools and is based out of a very exotic, in quotation mark, part of the world. It's located in Liechtenstein. That's where it's based. It's not because of any tax reasons, because it really did started there around 70 years ago in Liechtenstein. It's a tiny little triple landlocked country between Switzerland and Austria. And apparently it's the world's second richest country in terms of GDP, just behind Luxembourg. So I also spent a little bit over 3 years there, also in the legal and compliance department, always in Asia Pacific. That's my area. And before that, with a company that punches holes in the wall, I was in oral reconstruction. So, it's still construction, but it's much more smaller. So that company manufactures dental implants and also makes crowns. And that's a Swiss-based company. And then even before that, I was in construction. And I also have a little bit of experience in apparel, so in clothing, and shipping management, technical ship management. Span of around 20 years, I've always been in legal and compliance field. But then back in 2017, I started a legal and compliance communication best practice sharing platform called White Hat Guys. Mm-hmm. That's where I kind of want to team up with other like-minded people who are also passionate about making compliance and legal topics and how to communicate it in a more engaging and fun way, just to bounce ideas so that we can make something that is maybe inherently not very interesting a little bit more interesting. So that is something that I also are very passionate about, that I do on the side. And I think it is because of the White Hat Guys, that platform, that I gone up to some sharing session where maybe you also caught a little bit of the snippets of what I was presenting. So, this is how we met, man. Mm-hmm. Right? It was through one of those events, yes.
It's really interesting to have this conversation, particularly now. And before we went on air, we were talking a little bit about this because I'm in Windsor, Ontario. I'm actually looking across the river to Detroit, Michigan. You mentioned Detroit. Okay. You're in Hong Kong. I'm normally based in the UK, and we're having a conversation. Basically, we're a little microcosm of globalization here.
Yes.
And at the same time, there's a whole bunch of pressure on all of these international connections. We were talking a little bit about the Evergrande affair and how that's impacting global supply chains. Everything is, it's cliche, but things are interconnected, less so now. But it's really interesting that we're having this conversation now, and we're also talking about rules and compliance and, risk and things like this. So just to, right off the bat to say that what we're going to be talking about is very relevant, not just to people who maybe work in this space, but to how people get their things on their supermarket shelves or parts for their cars. If you're listening and you're somewhere in, I don't know, in Texas or Minnesota or in Sheffield or, some place like that, and we're learning we're learning some hard lessons here about globalization. So I just wanted to give this is an interesting time for what you do. Mm-hmm. So, but let's talk a little bit about this concept of compliance. So compliance sounds, as you say, it does sound very unsexy. It sounds like it's obeying the rules and so forth. But in order to work internationally, there's all kinds of things that really they're all about mitigating certain types of risk, and the people who work in that space traditionally they issue lots of big manuals and decrees and things. But I just wanted to take a step back. If you could talk a little bit about this White Hat Guys and where the idea came from and what it is and how you go about doing what you do.
Sure. Well, I don't think anybody, when they were a kid, there are some kids that might want to be a lawyer when they were asked, so what do you want to be when you grow up, right? But I don't think anybody would say that, I want to do compliance, at least maybe not during our generation. So, I think the whole kind of the backstory of me getting into compliance is total happenstance. It was completely, I wasn't really quotation mark prepared for this. It's just my former company, this is actually on the news, so I'm not saying anything too confidential. It was back in the 2007, around 2007, 2008. There was a huge kind of, you can call it a scam, like a collusion, okay? It was reported in the European court. And my employer then, one of the business units there, was fined 400 million euros for colluding with another elevator company. Okay, so elevators, it's quite niche. So they were just like sectioning the markets. They're doing all these antitrust things, price fixing, market segmentation, and things like that.
It's like monopolistic behavior.
Exactly. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you go to this customer, and I only go to that customer on the other days that you're not going. Things like that in a nutshell. So there was it was reported back then, 400 million, like I said. So of course it's just sends shockwaves to the whole organization. So they say, okay, we really need to make people aware that this is serious. And at Asia Pacific back then, it wasn't really like of course, antitrust, we know about it, but it wasn't really so publicized. It was only after that case it became a really big topic. So the company I think they were looking at the Rolodex. So for the younger generation, it's really, kind of like a ball with a business card. They're kind of So they found, Stan in Asia Pacific, he's like, with a legal background, close enough, right? So, and why don't we just give him our presentation on PPT, and he can talk about antitrust to the folks over in Asia and make sure that history doesn't repeat itself. So, when I was just looking at the deck, I was like, oh my goodness, this should be a better way to do this. I mean, this is not really, I know this is a very important topic, but it is like not a very engaging way. Like it's still, I'm kind of like the policeman, or, even if you look at it from another perspective, I kind of see myself as like a flight attendant, like doing those demonstrations, like you have to put on your life vest and things like that in case of emergency. Like nobody would pay attention to that flight attendant as that flight attendant is doing the safety demonstration. When was the last time you looked at it? But why does the airline do this? It's because they just have to, because it's safety, right? So I just think there must be a better way to do this. So I kind of trade that floating device, the life vest. So the next time when I was doing my compliance training, I put the code of conduct or the important parts, let's say, not just the antitrust topics, but there's also maybe anti-corruption elements. Basically, all the business concept, I put it on a life ring, just to present it to the group. So you know how like life ring is always like red, white with 4 different quadrants, right? So I just put all the principles, and then I draw, and I hire an illustrator to help draw out these concepts to make it a little bit more engaging, more palatable, bite-sized chunks concepts, so people can understand better. And then at the end of the training lessons, they will retain the information. So with White Hat Guys, really the key concept is to create sticky messages, to try to make messages stick more. And I know that from my compliance colleagues, they don't really, but they could be in other industries. They don't have to be within my own company. And they would often find that concept really interesting. So, it was like really through White Hat Guys that I can do some sharing with people, with compliance folks that are also desperate and also want to jazz up the compliance program. And I also learned a lot too, just chatting with them, understanding all your pain points of that. Like I never know that, wow, in the hotel industry, you have to face those risks. Or you were in the, say, the dental industry, or you're facing those risks. So I also use the White Hat Guys to kind of learn, as my own EMBA program.
So let's just talk a little bit about this topic, because look, sometimes if you think about companies that do bad things, like the Volkswagen situation, the emission scandal, right? Sometimes you have people at the top that know that they're doing horrible things to the environment and they're bribing regulators or all kinds of things. But sometimes, and actually quite possibly more often than not, these organizations get into trouble not because the people there want to do the wrong thing, but it's just the way in which the organization's structured, or people don't understand, or whatever, that the intent is there, but somehow because of like really shitty compliance training, for example, people don't really know what to do, even though they want to do the right thing. And you talk about organizations that are big and complex and lots of moving parts, and it's really difficult to make what you need to do clear. And so what you're talking about is taking a really dry presentation. I'm already envisioning this presentation of like a slide deck of 50 slides with legalese and everything. And I just like, if you have insomnia, that's what you do. Like that's exactly the kind of thing that you're going to read. So if you want people to retain that information and to act on it, that isn't going to work. And yet people that might have a core legal background, they think, okay, well, we told everybody what they need to do. Well, it hasn't sunk in. People aren't going to in a position to do the thing that you need them to do. So what you're talking about is like, let's actually bring this to life and let's use visuals and symbols and things to help people understand and make it really simple. Because I have the same thing in risk management, that I'm working with people that need to do some risk management, but they're not risk management professionals. So you have to make it really understandable to the people that you want to do the thing that they need to do. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, of course. And I think one of the problem is because when legal and compliance or even risk management, when we stand on stage, like immediately, like we're on a back foot because, they know, oh, here comes the policeman, right? So
yeah.
So that's why I think it's very important that when we present ourselves, we have to make sure that we are being as engaging as possible. Because, these topics, obviously, inherently, they make people feel very defensive. So I think by using relatable cases or just making things less serious, make yourself a little more human, speak human, not speaking legalese, right? Immediately people will start to, first of all, they will appreciate that effort definitely has been put there to make all these complicated or kind of what's in it for me type of messages feel more relevant. They would appreciate that. I often feel that people do appreciate that when you try to make it a little bit more simplistic, so more palatable. So that's the first. And then, after that, when they feel that the person that they are dealing with is not really setting up roadblocks, but they are facilitators, they would more often come to you with a problem or at the start of any project, before the proverbial hits the fan, that they come to you. So, like if you can start with the first step, you're already a very approachable, very engaging, you're already presenting yourself as such. You are actually doing a lot to, at least on the prevention side, you're definitely helping because you are spotting the issues before it's maybe, in square three, where they're already kind of, the problem already developing. Maybe it's getting into a bigger scale. But if you can really bring them to talk to you at the very beginning, then you can probably spot the issue, the risk, and you address it then. And it's just better for everybody. So I think this is it's really the best way to, in terms of risk prevention, if you can make yourself more approachable and have a more engaging message, definitely would help further down the road.
And where did the name White Hat Guys come from?
I'm a little bit of a TV junkie. I like to watch a lot of TVs. And it's this is kind of borrowing from Scandal, the TV show. I don't know whether you watched that before. It's Kerry Washington, and her character name is Olivia Pope. And she's often saying that, I have to wear the white hat. It's the white hat. It's kind of like the cowboy, the good cowboy, and it's also related to the 6 hats, right, of decision making. So the white hat is often the fact base, right? Everything has to be based on facts. So that's kind of the concept of the white hat guys.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. In old westerns, they'd all the good guys had the white hat and the bad guys had the black hat.
Exactly. Yep. That's the concept.
Could you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done? I know that you had a video. I mean, I think I first came across this video that you guys put out, and I was like, "Wow, this is funny. This is cool." And maybe some other little techniques that you've used to bring some messages home.
Yeah, well, I'm aside from White Hat Guys, there's also something that I'm also very passionate about. It's I do community theater. So I would like to bring a little bit of theater into the whole kind of delivery of the message. So, the video that you're referring to, it's kind of very relevant these days. It's the force majeure. Maybe to the broader audience, maybe they don't know about what is force majeure. Like force majeure is basically an event that took place that could frustrate a contract. So anything that, let's say, that you cannot foresee or you cannot predict, or that is completely out of your control, and therefore affecting you to put one contractual party to finish or perform the contractual obligation, then you can claim force majeure. So a perfect example would be what happened in 2020 because of COVID, right? There's a massive disruption to the supply chain. So at that moment, it was March 2020 when we were kind of at the height of COVID. So the legal department got together and we kind of addressed the business team, the frontline sales team to say, well, customers are definitely going to be asking for delivery of goods, or they're asking for us to, maybe hold back on some of the products to ship to them too. And perhaps that, or maybe we even would be dealing with our own suppliers. They might not be supplying the raw material, the normal kind of dependable time frame. So, this is something that we have to educate our frontline staff about. It's like, okay, you need to issue this force majeure notice to the customer, but beware that this does not mean that we are completely we can rid ourselves of any of our responsibilities. We still have to perform the contract. The force majeure notice basically serves as helps you buy a little bit of time. It's a time cushion only. Doesn't mean that once you serve it, you can just ignore the problem. So at the moment, people understand it. Okay, they know, okay, now we know this is COVID, serious disruption to the supply chain. We might not be able to deliver on time because, we're not getting a raw material. So, okay, let's issue this notice. But unfortunately, after 6 months, towards the end of 2020, I've been getting a lot of intermittent phone calls asking me to issue a force majeure letter just because it rains a little bit too heavy at a certain region, or that they just know that, we won't be getting our supply from this ex-supplier because, this ex-supplier is saying that, there's been some railroad blockages or some sort of strike that's going on. So immediately I have to make a video to correct that, to kind of tell people that, okay, just game out some scenarios, right? Just showing, I kind of put myself in the shower, pretending that there's a huge rain pour, and then just talking to my boss. It's like, you have to help me issue a force majeure notice. But then, the boss were asking me, well, how long have you been having this rain? 12 hours. So you kind of have to evaluate everything, right? It's okay, 12 hours. So maybe this is not really a force majeure. There might be some inconvenience caused, but this is definitely not a force majeure. Like force majeure, we're talking about like a flood, like a Katrina level flood. Or even like something like the Suez Canal. That's definitely a force majeure. You can't predict the Ever Given, or that I think that's a boat's name, right? Ever Given or Ever Forgiven. Right. It's just like blocking the whole kind of canal. That is force majeure. Now, that's the time you can issue a notice. So we kind of have to educate them. Okay, yes, this is it, but you also have to understand, if you often issue a force majeure notice, this is like the commercial talk. Like, this is like where I think you have to be a little bit less legalese, but more operationally minded. It's, if you issue this, like, okay, you might be buying some time, but you have to also understand the recipient of this notice is not going to be, first of all, very happy. This is not a good notice to receive. And also, if you issue it so often, it's kind of like cry wolf, right? Right. It's kind of lost its effectiveness or its meaning. So that's why I have to kind of do a little bit of video. I won't go into too much details, but the key is really to catch their attention, to understand there's a certain specific circumstances you can issue this. Like, if you misuse this, people are just going to ignore, okay, this is, like, they're just pretending there's a force majeure. This is not even a force majeure. Yeah.
Again, bringing to life some of these concepts so that somebody who's, issuing one of these notices all the time, you're going to start pissing off your customers.
Exactly.
And losing customers. And, you might have some grounds, but maybe not. And so just the prudent thing is to hold fire on that.
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, right, we kind of have to tell our business folks, to tell them that, okay, this is like a commercial discussion. Like, we are here. This force majeure notice is to issue. It's really to protect your backside. But ultimately, it's really down to timely communication with the customer. It's like you have to keep them up to date as to what is the latest situation. Okay, let's say right now in China, there is like a power shortage. So so our factories is only getting maybe like 20% capacity on maybe 2 days a week. So I think of course, that warrants a force majeure again, yes. But then, just because you send that out, like I always remind my business folks that they have to keep in constant communication with the customer, telling them, okay, like the local authority is telling me we're going to be getting electricity on Tuesday, for example. So just let them know that we're doing our best to make sure that they will get the delivery on time. And if we get the any latest information from the local government about the power supply, we'll let you know. So at least you that's the level of customer service that you need to maintain the relationship. Because first of all, this is obviously very frustrating. The customer is not getting what the customer really wants. And if you serve a force majeure notice, it's a double whammy. And then if you don't communicate, that's a triple whammy. So I think right now, like at least in my role, like I can't just be telling them, okay, just issue a force majeure notice. I think now it's been evolving to you have to factor in the human elements to the whole thing to make sure everything flows, right? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you can't really upset your customer.
Absolutely. Right. I'm just curious as to how you go about creating something like that. How do you pull together a message that has, higher impact? Do you have a way of, I don't know, you put yourself in the shoes of the end user, the recipient of the message, or do you utilize some creative processes, or do you bounce ideas? Because I'm imagining that there are people who are listening to this who maybe they don't work in compliance or risk or anything like this, but sometimes they need to take something that's kind of complicated and communicate and bring it to life in a way that is going to, resonate, is going to bring people, so not so that they only understand the message, but they act in a way that is intended. Do you have a process, or are there certain things that you do to kind of bring some of this stuff to life?
Yeah, totally. Well, I kind of have to go back to, okay, before COVID, right? So Whitehead Guys, all I do is I'm always setting up booths at different legal and compliance conferences or summits where I try to meet other people, to like-minded legal and compliance professionals that might be interested to kind of make inherently not very interesting topics and how to communicate it a little bit more jazzy. But it's so difficult to find. Like Hong Kong obviously is small, right? But with COVID, wow, I mean, sky's the limit now, because everybody's going on LinkedIn, they're communicating, they're sharing. So there's like a huge pool of, I found so many people just because of LinkedIn, or just taking part in various different seminars, or just, people doing gamification, or just basically sharing ideas through these, say, talks or communication, or just like experience exchange sessions. So I do get a lot from other compliance folks that will work in other industry. But I think for me, I think you hit the nails on his head, is the empathy part, because I think I can sit down and kind of think about what let's say the frontline professional, the frontline staff, when they're looking at the contract, and I think I can think of things that could help them more easily digest a procurement contract, or understand some conflict of interest concept or antitrust concept. But if you haven't really spoken to them, it just won't work. So there's one thing that's really important, is like you definitely have to get the ultimate user involved. Get them, talk to them, understand their pain points, and float your ideas and float your message to them. The more the merrier, right? If it hits, then it hits, because I find, maybe not just myself, but also people in my kind of background or in the same kind of function, we are very siloed. We just kind of think about this concept. Okay, this is like what they need to know. So, you try to think of ways to deliver that message, but you're not really thinking of how that is being received. Maybe what you're doing, it's well intended, right? But still, it really is not in the same kind of channel or same language as the recipient. So that is very important. So this is lately, when I want to roll out something, I definitely would get the functional head or the people that I'll be pitching this idea to get them as my sounding board for sure. Because I find before I might have some maybe launching of initiatives, it's not very effective. It's because I didn't go through this process. It's like too much of me thinking only, or the legal and compliance hat. I'm only wearing that hat. It's not very efficient because you spend all this time crafting and you think this is a very good message, but at the end it just wasn't really well received. So, or you could have just speak to the people who would be receiving this for maybe 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and you can just kind of polish the language a little bit better, and it's going to be much more effective that way. So, yeah, I think the empathy part when you talk about it, that this is a key. Like you really need to speak to your own people, especially those that will be receiving your message, and try to frame or craft it in such a way that it's more palatable to them. Not what you think they should hear, but how well they can hear. Yeah.
That's super powerful. I think empathy is a superpower in this day and age because we're all on transmit, not receive, right? We're all trying to get our message across. You see this in social media. It's a battle for eyeballs. It's a battle for getting your messages sunk in, and that happens inside organizations. That happens all the time. We're super distracted, and so the idea of just putting yourself in the shoes of whomever you're trying to connect with, and try and think about this as a two-way dialogue almost of conversation, then that's a much better way to get a message across. And then you might learn a lot along the way. Like you might, just readjust your message and just realize actually the way in which we're thinking about this is totally wrong. We need to reframe how we communicate this particular message.
Yes, and I think throughout, my I was telling you about the LinkedIn experience I had because I met so many like-minded individuals, and I think I don't know maybe this is only myself. I often find I think this is I can broaden this a little bit. It's within the legal and compliance field. People working in that field, we are not very focused on feedback. It's okay. This is, for example, I need to deliver this presentation because this is very important information. I need to deliver this to tell the people about it. And after you deliver it, and that's it. Seldom do we really ask for feedback. Like, what do you think? How can I do this better? Did you really catch what I communicate to you? Like, is there anything that's unclear? And I find, like I said, maybe not all, but at least for me, and a lot of the conferences that I sit in, not too many times that we get to fill out feedback, to give feedback, right? And I'm already talking about we are kind of in the same industry, so we kind of understand the concept a little bit better. Now, if you need to talk about these supposedly a little bit more bland and kind of an appealing topic to the sales and marketing people, wow, the gap is going to be even that much bigger, right? And so it's very important to get feedback from them. And I find that this is one of my weaknesses. I always have to remember and remind myself to get feedback, because this is the only way that you can improve, and you can make your message sticks even better. So I don't think I can stress that more. It's get feedback.
I want to talk a little bit about building on that point.
Yeah.
Compliance and it's basically about risk in your part of the world.
Yep.
Asia Pacific. We've talked about China a little bit, the struggles that we're seeing with power shortages and this Evergrande thing.
Evergrande, yes.
All of these things going on, and also you've got geopolitical tensions in the background and all this sort of thing.
Sanctions.
And the more that, and this is more about making sure that messages and some of these challenges are met kind of at the local level. I'm wondering if you have any insights, because I can imagine a situation where you have a UK company or an American company trying to get some of these messages across to Asia Pacific audience, and there's going to be some challenges because of maybe it's culture, maybe it's the local dynamics, And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or reflections on how one can make certain messages work in a different environment, different cultural, political, contextual environment.
I think the first is question that you have to ask the company first of all. Like, let's say, okay, you're in my shoes. I think the first question I ask the company is, what is your risk appetite? That's the first question. Because, okay, I know that, for example, like you talk about risk, and then what is associated with them over especially. I don't think it's only Asia Pacific specific. I want to talk about, like, let's say, gifting or entertainment, right? This is something that is it's kind of part of business, but oftentimes it could lead to like risk because it could be corruption, right? So what is your risk appetite? Because you have to understand, like in certain Asian countries, for example, South Korea, they actually put it in writing. When you want to take out a government official, the maximum you can spend is $25. Doesn't matter, it's a coffee or lunch or whatsoever, $25 US, that's it. So, okay, that's a very clear guideline you can follow because, okay, you go in there, okay, you can go entertain a government official, but please follow the guideline, $25 US. But what if you're in a jurisdiction where it's more flexible? They just say, okay, just do whatever is reasonable within limits. Now that's where you kind of have to, be a little bit, maybe adventurous is not the right word, but you have to be a little bit careful, right? When you define what is reasonable. What I use oftentimes is the Big Mac Index. I don't know whether you heard about that.
Sure.
The Big Mac Index is basically a universal kind of, because if you just use a currency exchange, it might not be entirely, say, practical. But if you use the Big Mac Index, because it just like gauges how much McDonald's Big Macs is worth, let's say in Malaysia or in India, and you kind of use that to adjust your maximum that you can spend for entertainment, because that is already good enough for a lot of these, let's say, government agencies. When they do knock on your door, they want to see that you have a policy in place and then you enforce it. Because if you don't have anything, of course that's bad. But let's say they do come knock on your door and say, well, there's been some complaints saying that you're entertaining your guests or your customers a little bit more frequent. But then you can show the code of conduct to say, well, we have already a policy here to say you have to follow, let's say, the Big Mac Index, say 50 euros or maybe 50 US. That's the maximum. And we also have here on paper, you can only entertain the same customer twice a year, for example. And if you can show the paperwork, the proper documentation that, yes, the lunch or whatever dinner, it was $50 US or below per head, and you have not been excessively or just too extravagantly treating your customer, it's okay. Like, I do find, because gifting or entertaining guests, it's kind of understandable that is part of business. Like, for example, in Hong Kong, we have the Mid-Autumn Festival, and during that time, people give out mooncakes to their customers. But if you let's say, give out mooncakes, you are giving mooncakes to the entire department, not just an individual. And then you're not giving something you might put inside a mooncake. You're doing something kind of funny. It's considered to be acceptable practice. But of course, you see people doing some crazy stuff, with mooncake package. There might be mooncakes, yes, inside the box, but there may be a Montblanc pen included.
Right.
Inside there. No, that's definitely not acceptable, So, yeah, so going back, like, it's really depending on your risk appetite. And then that could determine your maximum spend. And then on top of that is like you have to have proper documentation and make sure that you follow the written policy. And the last point is really don't do anything hanky-panky. Like, if you have something already set, just stick to it. Just anything that is beyond that is zero tolerance. If anybody practice that person needs to be let go. And I think that is also something that is very difficult to follow. It's like when you have a star performer doing that, like, that's where you really see what the company is made of. Like, if they really would let the star player go. I've seen people letting go of those star players because of those non-compliance, and I also see company look the other way. But then, maybe that's another story, or we can talk
Well, I think sometimes,
later.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to look at those star performers and ask some questions, why person performing so well, and particularly if you're comparing it to the rest of the competitors, the markets. If the market's down, but this person's, their department, their office division, whatever, is doing incredibly well, then you have to ask that question of why.
That's a red. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Also, that concept of gifts and hospitality and corruption, and people say that, well, in this culture or this country, gifts are a thing, it's a normal thing, and that may totally be the case, but having spent a little bit of time in Southeast Asia myself, I do know that people in a lot of those countries know there's a difference, right?
Yes.
When something's wrong, it's clear, and so there's that sometimes I find is a little bit of a cop out, that people say, well, in this part of the world, this is how things are done. Yeah, but people know when there's a quid pro quo going on, or
right.
something like that. But it's just how to communicate to make in the local context. It's a cop out to say that that this is how things get done.
Yeah, well, I can maybe give you a very practical example. Like,
please,
the timing, for example, is very critical, right? Let's say the same amount of hospitality, let's say $2,000. Okay, whether you are treating a group before a big contract is signed, or there's something worth celebrating, and then you use the same dollar amount. It's the same amount. It's the same restaurant. Everything is the same. All the people are the same. But the timing makes a huge difference, right? As to when you are entertaining. One can be considered, because you're just using all these wine and dine, and you try to influence the way people think, versus you're kind of celebrating something big, further down the road, right? And one even more practical one is like, this is something, I can share with you. It's okay. Not going to name the specific employer, but there was a marketing staff came to me. It's like, we are we're sponsoring something for a hospital. And I said, okay, so what are we sponsoring? I was like, we're getting a big, those flat screen TVs. And I said, okay, why are you getting a flat screen TV for the hospital? I was like, because, when you perform the surgery, it's a teaching hospital. Then you have a very nice TV, so all the students can watch the doctor as the doctor's performing surgery, can watch everything. So everybody can become a better doctor. So, yeah, of course. I mean, yes, this is something that is you are sponsoring something that is for the greater good, right? It's perfectly acceptable. Like, if you're doing this, it's for the betterment of the society. But then there was like another teammate came out, was like, hey, why don't we put this in the lobby so the people are waiting, they can watch the latest TV show, then they could be more, they could, you see, it's the same TV, but where you put it, it completely changed the context. You see what I mean? Like if you put it in the lobby, at a waiting area, already people are like, hey, this is like, there might be some corruption element into it, right? But if it's like put in an operating theater, same TV, everything, but
right.
the spin is like, there's educational aspect, there's a scientific aspect, there's like, it's just, everything is much more kind of, it makes sense that you put there, and the authorities would not be so challenging. Like but that is also the challenge, because you often feel like when you are you kind of educating the people how to kind of look for loopholes, That's the other drawback of because you're not trying to teach them how to avoid or try to avoid all these landmines. Of course, you're trying to help them, but you don't want to be educating them as so they become like smart criminals.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point. I had I think I've talked about this in the past on other episodes, but I had a friend who works in the financial services industry on the investment banking kind of deal making side, and so they go on these compliance training courses all the time in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the questions also reveal what's going on in between the lines, because you get these describe these questions. Oh, if I do it like this, And if I add this thing here, is that okay? Would that be okay? And so what you're getting a bunch of people that are trying to understand the rules so that they can work the way through the rules, which defeats the purpose of the training. It's compliance training, but actually you're training smart criminals.
Yeah, but okay, at the end of the day, right, I think what the key takeaway is, at least for the scenario I just described, is whatever you do, it cannot just be marketing. There has to be something scientific, because, that's one of the key message the company is pushing. It has to be educational, it has to be scientific. Like what you're describing, also, they are flying a lot of KOLs, those key opinion leaders. They are really, like, let's say they're the rock star in the industry. They can perform surgery really well. They'll fly across the world to kind of help promote the company. But of course, at the same time, when you look at their presentation, it has to be vetted by legal, by regulatory, of course, also by marketing. It cannot be just sell. It cannot just have marketing angles. It must be like patient specific, like, how this patient benefit, or how this patient's life changed like a complete 180 change because of the application of this device, right? So there should be more of that, like, how you improving people's lives.
How do they resolve that in the end, Stan? What do they decide to do with the television, the flat screen TV?
Well, then, of course, I was like, well, then the legal department obviously say don't put it out there in the open area. It has to go back to, because, we are helping a teaching hospital. This is a teaching hospital, like, for the students, for them to learn so they become better, surgeons. They can treat the public better. If that whole message has to be uniform, right? When we're doing the sponsoring, we are there to make the whole thing better. The students can learn better, so with the best equipment out there. Mm-hmm. So long as you follow the lines that your original purpose, then it's okay. Like, it's just when you start to think all these, hanky-panky kind of thing. Sure. Then it gets a little bit dicey. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but so that's why, like I said, I think it goes all the way back to the very beginning. It's like, with you can be a little bit more approachable as a legal and compliance person, then, these things, they would often come to you. They would come to discuss with you at the beginning, instead of they just completely skip you, or they find you as a roadblock, and they put it in the lobby. Then it's too late. The authorities came. It's like, hey, what is this? Like, this very nice looking TV there. We have a little bit of, we're not very comfortable with this arrangement. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this. You said, I didn't envision working in compliance or this kind of thing. I'm wondering how many people like you are out there in your world, in your compliance world, and whether or not you think there's a shift happening, or it's, I don't know, the type of people that go into legal and compliance work, are they expecting, do they need to make adjustments in order to get their messages across in the way that you have? And what are you seeing in Asia Pacific, in your world?
Well, I think now it's definitely picking up, because people definitely are more vocal about compliance. The reason is this: it's because in many jurisdictions there's actually rewards, or it's actually beneficial for whistleblowers. Yeah, they can make money, like reporting non-compliance. So, and it would bring a lot of reputational, of course, damage to the company. But if you have a very strong and approachable or engaging, or people kind of trust the internal legal and compliance team that it would do what's best, or be totally, it's just like the beacon of integrity, then at least that type of risk, you can kind of contain it, because the people will talk to you and they know that proper action will be taken against the people who are not doing the right things. These things, obviously, it still happens, but if you can manage it in-house and you can show people that you are a fair organization, like I was telling you about the star performers, right? If you're willing to let go of the star performers, it sends like a very loud message to people that stay behind to say, wow, the company does mean it. Okay, there's definitely good or rewards to be virtuous, right? And if I were to see anything that is not that's just not proper, it's kind of non-compliant, I'm not scared to report this internally because I know proper action will be taken against those people and nothing's going to happen to me. There's going to be non-retaliation. So I'm describing really a perfect world because, it takes time to kind of create that type of trust between the staff and the legal and compliance department or the legal and compliance team. But I think this is, like I said, people now, they're more aware. They know their rights and they know that they can report this and they can, even if they go outside, they can benefit from it, right? So there's many different motivations for people to report non-compliance. So, so this is the right time because the lights are on. But then you have to catch them, man. You have to catch them to come to you, like internally, not going to the outside. Now that's the challenge, for the legal and compliance team.
Yeah,
to build that trust.
Yeah, it's an interesting time because, as you say, now there are more rewards for whistleblowers. Although being a whistleblower is not easy. The financial toll, the psychological toll, the well-being toll. If you spot something illegal or unethical, I think most people in those situations just quit their job and just move to another company as opposed to, report the situation.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because I did experience where there is a good Samaritan, really. Just report the whole thing. Like, that's why we can really carry out a proper investigation because of a whistleblower who is very willing to help out. But then there's also some people that they probably maybe have a grudge against the supervisor. So before they go, they just sling a lot of mud. There might not be a lot of substantiated, nothing very substantiated they can prove. They just throw a statement to say, well, I was bullied, but there's no proof of that. But yet I have come across, like a whistleblower who kind of totally helped the internal investigation. So it came to a proper kind of end, and we were able to gather the relevant information. But I think more often than not, it's when you do see those very successful salespeople, the company decided to turn a blind eye, and then it just leaves a very sour taste. Not just for people who stay behind, but also hampered the legal compliance function or the reputation, because so it just make the legal compliance team like a toothless tiger, because you did all this investigation, but turns out the star performer is still here. Like it's just a very poor. It's a morale buster. You can call it that. So that's why it's when I say it's really when you really know what the company is made of, or what the ethics and compliance code or the code of conduct or that culture is made of. When you are faced with that, like a star performer doing something non-compliant, what does the company do afterwards? That's the very critical moment. And I've seen companies that do the right thing, meaning we have to part ways with a star performer, but sometimes not really. So 50-50.
That's great.
I'd have to say.
Yeah, that's it's actually an very interesting world and profession that, if done in the right way and taken in the spirit in which you take it, it's actually quite exciting. I am conscious of time. I think we probably need to let you go soon because it's your evening there. But just before we do that, one of the things I just was curious about in terms of this white hat guys that you've set up, where would you like to see it go? What's the vision, if you like, if you've thought about it, or is it just it's been more organic?
Well, okay, first of all, like it's because I do have a day job. So, I spend my time doing my day job with my employer. So, the white hat guys, okay, first of all, there's no direct conflict. So that's why my teammates and obviously my boss is in support of this. But I'm only doing this at my free time, or I would take annual leaves to really spend time to strategize or, help out other legal compliance professionals with their initiatives. But I don't know, like at the moment, I'm still kind of very dedicated to my current job. And this is more like a hobby, like a passion of mine. So yeah, like I think I also said it in the beginning. I think I learned so much just interacting with other like-minded people that I see, wow, this risk spectrum is actually that much wider or fuller. Like I can maybe talk to people in the insurance industry, in the hotel business, in other manufacturing, in clothing. They all have different pain points, and yet they also face the same kind of challenges. And I think we can also kind of take solace, share some of our war stories. Oh, okay, you're not alone. But we also learn from each other. It's like, okay, maybe next time I see a situation like this, maybe I can handle it this way. Borrow it from your experience, how to handle.
Sure.
So I kind of use that as like a learning platform at the moment, and also sharing. Yeah. But if it can go into something bigger, I'm more than welcoming. But it's just my time is also limited.
No, there's something to be said for hobbies. And I do this podcast as a hobby, and it's given me so many intangible benefits that sometimes you wonder, you need to grow it this direction or turn it into a business or this or that. And actually there's a lot of benefit that comes just by doing it. And I think more organizations should be encouraging their employees to take up hobbies because it's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful that my boss, like my whole team, because they do see that I'm also learning. Like I'm not just sharing my ideas, because I'm also getting from my counterparts, right? And I could bring those knowledge into my day-to-day, and that could benefit the company as well. So yes, I think that's the company. I think I see companies definitely helping their own colleagues or the staff to expand or to learn through these channels too. Yeah, there's definite benefits.
Sure, and I would say not just organizations, but just anybody listening. Just pick up a hobby, or dive into your hobbies a little bit more if you can, because there's so many benefits to it that don't just relate necessarily to your professional life, but I think it's very personally enriching as well. So I think we're running out of time, and I do want to let you go. But was there anything that you wanted to mention that you didn't get a chance to mention?
Well, maybe just the White Hat Guys tagline then.
Sure.
Put the coup in compliance. Yeah. So the compliance is spelled with double O and an L. Yeah. So put the coup into compliance. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we don't have the video. But maybe I can send you the name card so you can maybe post it. Yeah.
I'll put it all in the show notes. There'll be links in the show notes so people can check it out. Cool. Yeah. Well, and for anybody that wants to follow you or the White Hat Guys or anything like that, what are the best places to do that?
Well, just type White Hat Guys on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I'm there. So I respond to those. I think best is through LinkedIn. But in Instagram and the LinkedIn, you see some of my latest posting and so just some ideas on how to make compliance a little bit more jazzy and appealing. And legal too, not just compliance.
Sure. Yeah. Fantastic. And I think there's lots of lessons for anybody that works in a quote unquote boring industry. It doesn't have to be, you can bring it to life. And that's actually, and actually that's where that thing about creativity comes, where there's a little bit of boredom, right? There's like, how do I actually make this work? Or are you sitting there, you got nothing? That's where creative thoughts come from, right? So there's actually quite a lot there that one can do. Stan, this is great. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Well, thanks for having me, Ben.
No, thank you and all the best, and keep doing what you do.
Yes, so stay in touch, and I look forward to other great programs on your channel.
Fantastic.
All things risk. Yeah, with the octopus. Hey, actually, a funny note, right? The octopus right now, it reminds me of Squid Game.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think Squid Game, if you look at how they play the game, there's so many things about ethics and compliance. Like I think, that's like a big pool. All these different games. I'm just thinking how I can link those games with compliance.
Yeah, gamification is really
that's the next challenge for me.
Absolutely.
Of course, without the violence.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I use the octopus was kind of a metaphor for resilience, and
right.
you chop off an octopus's tentacle,
right.
and it kind of grows back. The octopus can camouflage. It's very intelligent. It's also a mysterious animal. So it's also, for me, it's a reminder that we don't know everything, and the DNA of the octopus is so different from anything else, in the animal kingdom, that it just reminds us that, we don't know everything. There's a little bit of mystery in the world as well. So that's why I chose the octopus. But we can get into that another time. But there's a lot there. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, all the best, Dan.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that. And one of the things to ponder, perhaps, is whether or not you think your organization would sever ties with a star performer if they broke the rules or if they did something unethical. Give Stan and the White Hat guys a follow, check out the show notes, and perhaps get a little bit inspired around how you could bring to life topics in your space, in your world, that are considered less than exciting or downright boring. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it. And if you want to get in touch, best to do that via allthingsrisk@gmail.com. And we'll be back. Until then, and as always, don't forget, risk is life.